Welcome to this special edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine presented by the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. Find out more about us at tertiumquids.org, on location at the Federation for American Immigration Reform Feet to the Fire radio rally. What an amazing event, and just the angel moms, the sheriffs, so many folks in here, and then squeaking in the middle, somebody who tells everyone that she's Michelle Malkin, but she's like 21 years old, and you've been doing this so long, Michelle. You look great. Thank you so much. Brand new book out called Open Borders, Inc., which answers, I think, a lot of the questions that I always have, no matter what the policy is. Who's profiting from it? And good to see you. How are you doing this morning?
Good. I've been running around all day, still got a little bit of gas, and so glad to join you, Joe.
No writer's cramp from signing books. I know she's been... So how long was the process of digging into the paper trails and following leads down rabbit holes to start finding where the money connects to the idea of amnesty and open borders and things like that?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. I mean, the actual compiling of this book took about 8 months, but really this is a 25-plus year project for me because immigration enforcement has been one of my primary topics as a syndicated newspaper columnist, and my blogs and my documentary work. And this is my 7th book. It is the longest book by far at nearly 500 pages with 1,600 footnotes. In terms of compiling the information, a lot of it is open source, and I do give credit to many of the investigative journalists and a lot of the think tanks as well that have been doing this work. The Center for Immigration Studies, which has a huge presence here, and then of course a lot of the researchers for FAIR who have been doing this work long predating the Trump campaign's realization that this was going to be a winning issue and the existential issue of our time.
It was always a frustration. I've been coming to this for 12 of the 13 years they've been holding it. And you ask simple questions like, hey, can we just do E-Verify? I remember when I grew up in New York, there was this campaign to go after the people who hired the prostitutes. Well, okay, let's go after the businesses that are paying the coyotes the money to bring the illegals over the border to get cheap labor. And nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because you can't simply blame the Democrats and George Soros and radical identity politics groups for sabotaging full enforcement of E-Verify. It's the big business right. It's the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And my column that I wrote today, which is adapted from a section in Open Borders, Inc., talks about Ana Navarro Cardenas and her husband, Al Cardenas, who was the former head of the American Conservative Union, who is now lobbying in Florida to sabotage Governor Ron DeSantis' efforts, not only to stave off driver's licenses for illegal aliens, but enforcement of E-Verify.
Whoa, what happened there? How did they get to him?
Of course, Al Cardenas is a big Beltway swamp lobbyist who has, made a living subverting American sovereignty, and so has his wife, who was literally a foreign agent. Okay, she's a Nicaraguan-born illegal alien who was amnestied in 1986, whose first job was to lobby for NICARA, which was one of the amnesties that followed after 1986. And profited and benefited some 1 million total beneficiaries from Nicaragua and other countries. These are the people who now, proliferate in the mainstream media, pose as Republicans, when Ana Navarro herself was the honored guest at Joe Biden's recent fundraiser in Miami.
And they'll wheel them out onto the set of MSNBC with the banner Republican, conservative.
Republican strategist is what they say, right? Of course, their strategy is to undermine the immigration enforcement Republicans every step of the way.
It may be the most brilliant thing President Trump did during his campaign was to frame it in a way, you've done it for years, I've done it for years. You sit there and you say, look at all these people, the bureaucrats and everything. He just said, it's the swamp. It's the swamp, and we have to clean it out. And these are the people, like you said, you spend enough time in here, it starts to get its tendrils on you because you want to be part of the in club. You want to get invited to the cocktail parties. And I think that's what drives them more crazy about President Trump than anything is he doesn't care about that. He came in with his own cachet. He doesn't need their popularity.
That's absolutely right. And the speech that he gave at the United Nations General Assembly this week was one of the best speeches that I've seen delivered by any politician. And unfortunately, it was overshadowed by the impeachment circus. That is by design, not by accident.
And let him have that cycle. Because, if Joe Biden gave that speech, which would, of course, knock everyone over and we'd wonder who's filling in for Joe Biden, but if it was a Democrat, they'd say, it's the second coming of Jack Kennedy.
Yeah.
It really was that good.
Yeah, and unfortunately in the Democrat Party, what we have is complete open borders insanity, with the possible exception of Tulsi Gabbard, who has, a few brain cells of sanity on immigration and immigration enforcement. But there is an intersection between the impeachment mob and the open borders mob. They both have the same goal, which is distraction and destruction and the denial of a second Trump term.
Do you think, we're visiting with Michelle Malkin, the book is Open Borders, Inc. It's in the stores, on Amazon. Is there and I always say Amazon's the easiest for everyone to do, but would you prefer them to go to your site directly to order it, or the publisher directly to order it, or should they just go to Amazon?
Yeah, I know that it's somewhat of a quandary because Amazon itself is headed by Jeff Bezos, an anti-Trump radical who was given millions of dollars to support illegal alien dreamers. But, we have to sort of wean ourselves off when we can from these open borders Silicon Valley platforms. On the other hand, I'm trying to get the word out here.
Yeah,
so,
right.
So that to the extent that you can use those platforms to deliver this message, use it.
Sometimes it's nice to rub their nose in it. If Jeff Bezos has to list, Open Borders, Inc. as one of his top bestsellers, boy, that's going to sting.
Yeah, that's right. And the New York Times as well. When we made the New York Times list for top sellers of both combined ebooks and nonfiction print last week.
Michelle, you mentioned all the footnotes in the book, and I think that's a key thing because I listen to the radical left, and they all want to name call, and they all want to say Trump's just lie. Yet then the transcript of the phone conversation comes out, and it's egg on the face everywhere. It's, well, that's what we meant, and now the whistleblower thing is, it almost seemed tactical to get them to overplay it. But with the footnoting in this book and all the research, obviously I'd love for conservatives to not have to be 10 times more judicious in their background checking, but we do because everyone wants to attack us for being haters and throw grandma from the train and that kind of thing. That's a real important part of this book, isn't it?
Yeah, I did my homework, and I urge every reader to do his or her own homework as well. And it's interesting and helpful that you mentioned this concerted attack on us as xenophobes or haters, because there's a very important chapter on the Southern Poverty Law Center, a Soros-funded entity which I call the most ruthless smear machine in America. They have targeted FAIR for upwards of 20 years now.
They had Republicans in Central Virginia attacking me for coming here and hanging with the nativists.
Yes, that's right. And, it's no joke. They have ruined people's lives. But on the other hand, people are fighting back. There are a number of defamation lawsuits that the SPLC has lost. It should be a completely discredited organization because internal whistleblowers have reported on the sexual harassment and racial discrimination within the Poverty Palace's own four walls.
But it's for good. They're trying to do good work.
Oh, that's right. It's all in the name of the good. But this is also, I think, a discredit of the mainstream media, which continues to quote the SPLC as if it is some sort of legitimate arbiter of what constitutes hate or not.
Well, I know that I work with FAIR, obviously, quite a bit. I'm a board member of the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. They're a hate group as well, so I'm just winning on all fronts. But at some point, do you think the American public, and I'll let you go on this, Michelle Malkin has spent some great time with us. She's been signing books all week here at FAIR. The black community, the Latino community. I watched the rally the president held last week with all the Latino community, and they're going crazy for him. I watched the Nevada General Assembly put in school choice, and all the Latino families lined up for it. And they all had the Democrat bumper stickers, but they were lining up for this conservative principle like school choice. And they were winning over the discussion little by little, slowly but surely. Do you think that when 2020 comes, and we're a little bit biased here in Virginia because we have a 2019 where we could lose the whole General Assembly because Terry McAuliffe is out there comparing every Republican in Virginia to Donald Trump. Trump. And some of them are flinching from it to their discredit. But do you think these communities are grasping this enough to, again, push the president into victories in Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania and maybe even other states that are usually blue states, like his trip to California?
Let me put it this way. With so much potential illegal alien voter fraud on the table heading into 2020 and the sabotage of election integrity, every vote matters. And the more woke, to borrow the leftist phrase.
That's cultural appropriation.
Yeah, I know. I'm appropriating the left here. But the more woke that individuals in these communities can be, the better. I also think, however, that we cannot discount the working class white Americans across this country who've been demonized and who've been abandoned by the Democrat Party. The radical identity politics that has poisoned public discourse, every academic institution in this country really has to be pushed back against. And that's what I hope, the message of encouragement that I leave at the end of Open Borders, Inc. White, black, brown, or yellow, it doesn't matter. I mean, if your blood runs red, white, and blue, we need you.
Well, and rule of law protects people. It's not there to put your cousin in jail. It's to protect your cousin from having his stuff stolen or his job taken out from underneath him. People have to learn that. And that's why the sheriffs here are so important, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's important to show public support for law enforcement and immigration enforcement. They are increasingly under fire. The incitement of violence by the so-called mainstream of the Democrat Party, which marches lockstep under the banner of abolishing ICE and not replacing it with anything.
In Charlottesville, they want to make our jail a sanctuary jail where they, catch and release. We got them, let them go. ICE will figure it out.
There's a very important map in an appendix in Open Borders, Inc., and it was supplied by FAIR. And it shows all of the 564 sanctuary jurisdictions that have proliferated across America, or rather metastasized like a cancer, cities, counties, and states. And we have to stand up. I hold Stand With ICE rallies across the country as part of my book tour. I've done it in Colorado, Maryland, going to Washington State. Pacific Northwest is almost completely lost now. But we have to do what we can in our power, whether it's at the ballot box, whether it's with defunding Open Borders, Inc., at the collection plates, with regard to these nonprofits that have hijacked, their role as charities. And we have to do everything that we can to prevent a sovereign nation from turning into a sanctuary one.
Michelle Malkin, thank you so much for being on with us. I hate to ask this, but you have so many fans. Book tour, relax for a little while, spend time with family. What's next? Do you have an eye on another project or run for Secretary of Commerce or something?
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I'm maintaining my voice in all of the platforms that I do have. The book, in part, is dedicated to my friends and allies who've been relegated to the Valley of the Banned. And for the near future, continuing to go on the book tour, organizing these Stand With ICE rallies, practicing what I preach, and, daring Silicon Valley to ban me.
Well, at some point, they're going to blow up in their face. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you for letting us be of service to you this morning. The reaction, and we'll have more of the reaction from our congressional representatives regarding the movement to, and here's how they play with words, if I may, and we're waiting for Evangelist Alveda King to come by and visit with us. They play with words. Oh, we're starting an investigation into the efficacy of the proceedings that might be. So what they're trolling. This is, we don't have anything, so we're going to start an investigation because we can start an investigation, and once we've started the investigation, then that becomes the implication. So it is one of those things that, it's how, unfortunately, Washington works, quote unquote, air quote, works there. And so joining us now from It's Priest for Life and Civil Rights for the Unborn is Evangelist Alveda King and Angela King as well. I know Angela is actually to be on the next segment, but it's a package deal. No, you guys can sit down. I'm not charging by the minute here. It's so great to meet you for the first time. And Dr. Alveda, thanks for coming by again. How are you doing this morning? How has everything been so far?
Good.
So, when we, you don't need those, okay. But when we look at the way race is being used in our modern parlance to be a cudgel towards pushing to political party, I may not be alone, but I feel like it sometimes, that I feel like they're doing it in this backhanded way of saying, you're not ever going to be able to take care of yourself, so you better vote for us so we can take care of you. And I find that to be an offensive message. And if somebody tried to tell that to me, there'd be hell to pay. I mean, am I the only one? Or am I imagining that?
Well, I'm going to take it back a little bit. I'm the Director of Civil Rights for the Unborn with Priest for Life. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to put it into my playing field, as it were. Margaret Sanger said that colored people are like weeds. They need to be exterminated, so we don't want the word to get out. She founded Planned Parenthood.
Oh, yeah.
So they came up with this beautiful package of entitlement, bringing African-American women to clinics and things in their neighborhood, mm-hmm. helping them with family planning, which was really birth control and harmful shots and pills and things that are connected to breast cancer and all that. So that particular model went out all over America. Bernie Sanders recently said that we've got to do population control.
Oh, yeah.
For the environment. Who you going to control? Black people, right?
Well, God bless him for at least being conceited enough to be honest about it.
But anyway, so we make you entitled. We give you all these grants and things. You can't do it. You begin to depend on us, as you say, vote for us, the party that's going to give you handouts.
Yeah.
Not handouts. We're not going to teach you how to fish.
And if you vote for the other guys, they're going to take away your subsidy, your lunch subsidy.
All these nice handouts we're giving you.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah.
We were talking in the last segment with Diamond and Silk about it. It's almost like the Jim Crow laws without going through the trouble of making Jim Crow laws. It's like we want to marginalize you. We want to push you to the sidelines because this special group of people gets to make the decisions for everyone. And that's the part. Now, is it resonating? Because I feel like they say it, but it isn't making an impact.
It's not. You're not hearing it as well. And so President Trump, you hear him say, we all bleed the same. Mm-hmm. So in other words, we're one race. I learned from my daddy, Alfred Daniel Williams King, the brother of Martin Luther King Jr. We're one race, one human race. Now, I don't know how long I have with you, but I want Angela to weigh in on this since she's sitting here with me on the station. Is her mic on by any chance?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Angela, weigh in on that. Answer about the racism issue from your generation.
I think what I see a lot in my generation is more so colorism versus racism. I mean, just to be completely honest, I mean, being a young black conservative, when I came out with my support for President Donald Trump, it seems as if that I was attacked by everybody but the white racists and supremacists that they complain about. It seemed as though that I was being attacked by my own community. But I think that race and religion are things that constantly cause us to be divided. As long as we can blame someone's race or as long as we can blame someone's religion, then we'll constantly be at each other's throats. And once we realize that we all bleed the same, we're all one human race, then I think that we can move ahead in harmony.
When the president addressed the UN, and oh, by the way, that was yesterday,
but
too.
Isn't that crazy? One of the best speeches. He outlined his platform, his plan so perfectly. Yeah. And then the Democrats come up with impeach, and nobody even hears that he was at the UN.
And he says the most beautiful things about, endowed by our creators. We believe that our creator gives us these rights, and that you need to stand up for your citizens' rights the same way.
If you love your country, take care of your country.
When was the last time you heard a president talk in those kind of terms?
John Kennedy tried.
Yeah.
And
we saw what happened to him.
You see what happened, you see?
Yeah. Well, but your uncle, your father as well, I mean, they fought for your uncle's last speech.
Yeah.
I have it. I save it and I bring it out because he says, just live up to the words you put on paper.
That's it.
He wasn't asking for anything extra.
Nothing
he said, just stop
treating
people differently.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it was the Democrats who were the ones that were the arbiters of that. And I think you
and
see,
they have been all along, but it was couched in false compassion. That we care about you. We're going to give you all these things. We're going to take care of you. And so that's when you hear people say, come off the plantation, and then people get mad. Well, we're not on the plantation. You're the ones that's on the plantation. That people don't get it. But we have to stand up as American citizens and participate in the American dream and own the American dream.
and realize that the American dream is whatever you want to make of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
That's the real secret, is it's a personal dream. Can I hang on to you guys? I know, Angela, you were actually booked for my 7:35 segment. I don't
Okay.
know how heavily scheduled
I'm not sure
you
what
guys
time my
are.
next.
Well, you guys look at it. I got to run to the news at 7:30, and it's Alveda
If
King
not,
and
I'll
Angela
leave her
King.
here for her segment.
Yeah, it's
and run
Priest
to
for
mine.
Life and
It's Priest for Life and the American King Foundation with Angela.
Thank you for letting us be of service to you at the Federation for American Immigration Reform Feet to the Fire radio rally, where it is an honor to have back on the program two of the greatest performers. Got to see them in Richmond, and then they got to come and sit down with me last year and talk Charlottesville and everything going on all around it. Diamond and Silk. How are you both doing?
Gosh, we're doing
Amazing.
wonderful. Doing wonderful.
So, how has the year been since last we chatted? I mean, I see you guys on YouTube. Have you suffered any of the trouble that a lot of other commentators have had with social media and YouTube channels and things like that, throttling back your followers and things like that?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, everybody.
Yes.
They don't like your...
Remember, we was on the Hill in 2018 about censorship when
Yeah,
it
that's
comes
right.
down to Facebook. Yeah, and it have not stopped.
Right.
In fact, I believe that it's gotten worse because our message is so strong, and we're enlightening people, and the left do not like
They don't
that.
like it at all.
I'm going to walk out onto some thin ice here, but that's okay. That's what we do.
Just don't fall through.
Well, I'm counting on you both to catch me if
All
I do.
right.
If you go back to the 40s and the 50s and the Jim Crow laws,
Come on.
they had laws that said if you speak this way, you can't come here. If you look
Right.
this way, you can't come here.
That's it.
This month is the 60th anniversary of a group we call the Charlottesville 12, the first people to break through the the segregation of the Charlottesville schools, where they closed the schools. Rather than integrate them. The governor sat down and said, there's a statute to the man that set up most of those laws. But this is the same kind of thing we're doing now, only without the rule of law. We're just saying, oh, yeah, you don't need to hear Diamond and Silk or Deneen Borelli because they have a message that we don't like.
So back in the day, people were being discriminated against based on the color of their skin, and today they are being discriminated against based on the color of their politics.
That's
which
right.
is so sad. So
Yes.
it's funny that you brought up the Jim Crow law. This is the new Jim Crow era that we're living in. If they don't like what you say, then they will ostracize, criticize, stigmatize, and try to stop you at all costs.
Yes.
And it's unfair because now what they're doing is encroaching upon our First Amendment rights.
Yeah, see, and you got to also remember that back in the day, you was lynched with the news. Today, you're being lynched with algorithm. Algorithms as they choke out your platform.
Right.
It's also character assassination, too.
Absolutely.
Because we can say whatever we want about you, and then you have to prove that it isn't true.
Look at how they did Lori Loomer and all of them. It was a character assassination. Slander is what it was.
Exactly, and they do the same thing to Diamond and Silk when they take and say that we're white supremacists and we're black women.
Black women.
I mean, you know,
Unbelievable.
and then whenever our children or grandchildren go and look us up years later, they're gonna be looking for white supremacists, and they're gonna see grandma is a black woman.
That's right.
How was that? How did you do that?
We ain't never been to no KKK meeting. We don't wear
been
white
there.
sheets on our heads.
We don't do that.
There's a famous picture from Charlottesville in front of a Civil War memorial where a kid has got a megaphone in my face and he's yelling at me, calling me a white supremacist, even though I'm there with 3 other black men. One of them wanted to be on city council to represent. But why in 2019 are we still talking in these terms? We just want people to
listen to me. We still talk in these terms because the left is always pushing racism.
Right.
This is the only way they think that they can win an election.
Yeah.
It seems like it.
Keep you stuck in the pains of your ancestors to make it look like you've been a slave when you know you've never been enslaved. And that's why they play Roots, the next generation, and they talking about the old generation to make it feel like it's the right now generation. And you got people that is weak-minded and just unlearned right now because it's generational after generational, and they think that it is okay to do that. So the Democrats has been using that same tactic, okay?
Right.
Keep people stuck in a rut looking really messed up because they know it can keep us separated by race. It'll be easier for them to control
And
us.
also, you know, if you didn't notice here, Al Sharpton said we don't need another slave
A new
master.
slave
We don't need a new
Okay.
slave master.
Don't even start with me.
Yeah.
I ran into some of my friends from Poughkeepsie. I didn't know them at the time, but I started my radio career up that way. And the first big news story, maybe it was training me for Charlottesville 2017, they sent me up because a young girl claimed that 2 state troopers had kidnapped her and raped her for the weekend and left her on the side of the road. Her name was Tawana Brawley.
Oh.
And I met Al
Remember
Sharpton for the first time. I also met Rudolph Giuliani for the first time then. But it all turned out to be untrue. But one of those state troopers wound up taking his life because how do you're talking about character assassination. It
How
was
do you
all
come
made-
back for that?
Right.
on that?
Yeah.
Where's the reparation in that?
Where's the and listen, and then you see that they're trying to push reparation. Black people don't need reparation. What they need is liberation from the Democrat Party and their ideology.
Are they getting it? I've seen some of the president's rallies, and I've talked to friends of mine who are like, they are treating him so badly, and then the people on the street don't see the matchup to what the Nancy Pelosi's of the world are saying, and it's playing, and it's actually helping the president.
Oh yeah, let me tell you something. The rally in Fayetteville, you all know he came to Fayetteville, and we had the opportunity to speak at that rally. That was a very diverse rally. I was so excited to see my black brothers and sisters showing up in droves. Let me tell you something. People are not stupid.
Right.
When they see how you're trying to take it, and you're basically trying to politically lynch
Yep.
this president for no reason, vilifying him for no reason. If you do it to him, you would do it to us as an average American citizen.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they talking impeachment. You cannot impeach based on your political bias. They have a political bias towards the sitting president because he won, and they know they can't beat him in 2020.
That's
No,
right.
they sure certainly don't look like it. Where can people find you now on Facebook, YouTube? How can they follow
Diamond
you?
and Silk. And listen, we have a huge announcement coming up.
Huge.
Oh, you
And
didn't
we
save
want-
it for me? You're not going to get... Oh,
Look,
man.
the beans are still cooking. We're still
All right,
seasoning
all
the pot
all
right now.
all right.
No.
But we want everyone to go to chitchatme.com, chitchatme.com. Put in your email address so once we, spill it, you will be the first to know.
All right.
That's right.
Chitchatme.com.
That's
Diamond
right.
Silk, thank you so much for coming back over and
Thank
visiting with
you.
us. Have a
Thank
great
you.
time here at the Federation for
We will.
American
Wonderful.
Immigration
Thank you for
Reform.
having us.
I'll tell you, I would have lost this bet when Ken Cuccinelli took the job at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services as the director. I said, well, that's the last we're going to hear from Ken, because that's my experience with folks who actually go to work in the government. That's the last they want to actually talk to you.
Well, you cross the Potomac. God put it there for a reason. We should stay on the other side of it, but here we are.
Yeah, first and foremost, the analogy calling this place the swamp, since it started as
it's hardly an analogy. They built the thing on a swamp. Yeah.
Absolutely. Ken, it is great to catch up with you. I actually have an artifact. This
I recognize
that came during a campaign for Attorney General nomination. Everyone at the convention got one, and we appreciate it. The first question most people ask me about you, because of the way the press likes to characterize people, is like, I thought he was a never Trumper.
Because of the convention.
Right. Well,
yeah.
but
I'm a never RNCer is what I am.
Well, and you did a half an hour with us, and again got me in huge trouble with the RNC chair.
Good
because
for you.
I was interviewing people off the menu. I actually was kicked out of the RNC hotel.
Yeah, well, they would have kicked me out if they could by delegate credentials. So,
but
couldn't do it.
You did a half an hour with us explaining the whole thing, that the press was miscovering it and everything else.
Oh, radically. People can still go to thebullelephant.com and search for the whole set of rules. We put all of the rules that we were trying to amend right there, so anybody can read it, judge for themselves, and see what we were doing was trying to take power from the RNC Central Committee, and give it out to the grassroots. It would have done no harm at all to President Trump. He was the nominee at that point. We weren't trying to undo that, and frankly, I was working to get him votes at that point.
Well, and also, it is something that's come up a lot even since then.
Yeah.
Is the power structure that has created this ersatz fourth and fifth branch of government, the legislative, executive, judicial, Republican, and Democrat. I mean, the party structures have become so entrenched in this that you watch the inability to get anything done in Washington
or
in
unwillingness. I mean, look, the House in particular on the immigration issue, they have show hearings all the time. They're going to do more today. Tom Home will kick it off, I think, and
he's great
in colorful fashion, I'm sure. And I reserve my Hulk Hogan mic drop gif for Tom Home and tweets, but he. They do that, but with no intent of legislating.
Right.
And if we're going to solve the long-term problems in our immigration system, and there are a lot of them, that has to happen in Congress.
Well, you've always been such a brutal rule of law guy. I mean, even the mischaracterization of the whole situation with UVA and Michael Mann. You just wanted to make sure that UVA wasn't afoul of the Fraud Against Taxpayers Act. Yeah. That's all. You were their lawyer.
Right. After people who worked there publicly said they were steering conclusions with public dollars.
Go figure.
Imagine that.
So you take over at immigration, and everyone loses their mind. They think, oh, this guy's just going to round up.
I'm sure you were shocked by that.
And for everything from round up the usual suspects, comments and things like that. You even had a Statue of Liberty sent to you because somehow...
Yeah, as a protest. Yeah,
these people...
So now it's decorating my office. We brought it into my
funny.
office.
That's good.
But three-dimensional trolling. Yes.
When they did that, I said, do they understand that as nice as that poem is, that's not immigration policy?
Well, certainly I kept making that point, but and what it told me, and you'll appreciate this, Joe, is that they just didn't have a substantive complaint that they could stand on. There just isn't one. Look, that rule was a continuation of well over a century's tradition in this country of requiring self-sufficiency on the part of people who want to come here long-term as immigrants. And self-sufficiency is a core American value. We are implementing a law passed in 1996 that was so uncontroversial, it was passed through the Senate on a voice vote. And people like Steny Hoyer, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer voted for that law.
Yeah, and they've been around long enough, it's come back to haunt.
Well, that's right. Well, now it's politically inconvenient, and so they when we actually implement it, because rules hadn't been put in place all from 1996 to now to implement this. And ironically enough, some of the states suing us, New York, Massachusetts, were among the first to have state
Rules.
public charge laws on the books.
Well,
so I think they should have unclean hands in court terms and be thrown out of court. But
I like that reference. My favorite immigrants are my in-laws, and
you're a wise man.
Well, absolutely. But my father-in-law was a Scottish immigrant in the 50s, got a job at a machine shop. First thing he notices is the only person who's bilingual in the place is the, quote, shop steward, and that he's running a bank out of his office. And all the guys are like, oh, here's, and he was telling them what they were. And my father-in-law saw it and said, this is wrong. You're getting ripped off. Yeah. Got the guy fired, got the union to come in and do something, and they started a whole new union shop around it. But this is the exploitation that if we don't have rule of law, these men and women who are coming here.
Yeah, it applies in a lot of ways. And you describe a labor situation that certainly exists in this country. Though even in Virginia, I mean, during my term as AG, one of the things that I accomplished was getting Virginia from one of the worst states in dealing with human trafficking to being one of the best. And a lot of it was just convincing people there really was a problem.
Yeah.
And including, on a bipartisan basis, the pre-existing leadership. It was part of the motive to run, and we were successful in doing that. And we were successful not because we drove through all this stuff everybody opposed, but because we educated them and convinced them there was, in fact, a problem. And during my tenure as AG, I mean, we put some people in jail for 10, 20, 30, 50 years for this stuff. Mm-hmm. In Northern Virginia, sex trafficking and labor trafficking, they were operating out of Fairfax County Public Schools.
That's frightening.
I mean,
it's makes you
I remember one young lady at 3.9 GPA was a victim participant in this, and this is real, and part of it is driven by international trafficking, and that takes us back to the border.
Well, your job, though, and I liken you to a cancer doctor, like an oncologist, because like cancer, it's one word, but it describes a dozen different ailments.
Yeah.
Lymphoma isn't breast cancer, isn't sarcoma, is it? So immigration reform isn't about, the border. It's not about drugs. It's not about
one thing.
It's all these different things. And they all have to have different solutions. So is that moving forward?
It is. I mean, look, even in the absence of congressional participation in solving this problem, the president has been aggressive and active. Certainly those are things that he specializes in, and in ways that his predecessors of both parties just didn't, and both domestically and internationally. We're putting in place a lot of tools that allow us to reimpose the rule of law, the faithful execution of the laws in this country. The president has very successfully used international diplomacy aggressively, and in ways his predecessors wouldn't.
And
like you look at Mexico and the threats about tariffs and so forth, and the actual imposing of tariffs on China. Mm-hmm. So if you're Mexico, you see what he's doing with China, he's for real.
Right. If he's going to do this with China, what do we have?
Right. And the reality is, for all of our trading partners, God bless America, we are more important to them than they are to us. And that is a point of leverage that no president for a long time has been willing to use. President Trump thinks it's a no-brainer. And we've gotten cooperation from Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala because he's been willing to do that.
You're also, as you pointed out, enforcing laws that have been on the books in some cases for decades.
Long time, yes.
So, that's the disingenuity of it. Ken, it's so great to catch up with you.
Good to be with you.
Can I get
Follow
you
me on
back
Twitter,
on the show
USCIS Cuccinelli, and you know how to spell it. USCIS Cuccinelli.
Isn't that the
so
new
I hope
show
folks will
with
follow me on there.
Mark Harmon starring in that, right? USCIS
oh my goodness.
Los Angeles or something.
Oh my gosh. That would be painful.
Ken,
more television to not watch.
And we didn't even get into him riding scooters around Washington, D.C., but we'll have to save that for the next time you're on.
There you
go. But yeah, if you're in D.C. and you see a guy on one of those scooters and he looks like Ken Cuccinelli.
With protesters chasing him, yeah.
Joining us now from the great state of Florida, Congressman Matt Gaetz. Matt, thank you for coming by and visiting with us
Thanks
here.
for having me, Joe.
Now, truth be told, if they told you where the Dubliner was or the Phoenix Park Hotel, which was the one you'd know for a landmark's sake?
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't get out much. I am actually one of the 100 members of Congress who sleep on the floor of my office 4 nights a week and shower down in the gym. So there are days they don't even let us outside. We live like tunnel rats underneath the city of Washington. But it's good to be here with you and so many dedicated conservatives who I think have got the right message on immigration.
Well, let's hit immigration first, because Florida certainly has seen its issues with, Fidel Castro's flotilla, and just open the jails, show them where the boats are, and say who could figure.
Yeah.
And the rule of law, because especially the Cuban community in Florida seems like they get it. They understand what rule of law means, because a lot of them, either they or their parents came from a country where whatever the whim of the month was law.
Yeah, Florida's an awesome state, a diverse state, and the Cuban Americans who fled tyranny and sought liberty came to Florida. They built businesses, they hired workers, and they live a prosperity in our state that we all appreciate and work into our valued community. But I've tell people of all races, backgrounds, and nationalities and ethnicities do not appreciate what we have seen with a catch and release policy advanced by Democrats and attempting to be curbed by Donald Trump. This notion that 40,000, 50,000, 100,000 people can show up every month, that we can apprehend them, and that 4 days later we hand them a plane ticket to go from the Phoenix or Tucson airport to wherever they want to go in the United States of America, courtesy of the U.S. taxpayer, only to wait 3 years for a court case that they're never going to show up for. Oh, and then by the way, when they don't show up and a judge says that these people have no right to be in our country, when we actually do interior enforcement and go remove them, we're called a bunch of racists.
Right.
And I mean,
that's the hardest
It's just
thing.
crazy to me, the notion that enforcing our laws would be anything other than just and virtuous in our great country.
Now, in this, I feel like there's a subtext of you shouldn't own property. The idea that you have property is immoral somehow. And I hear this with some of the open borders crowd. Why should you have that? And I don't have a lot of property, and it's actually property I rent. But the idea that I have it is some offense against the rest of the world who isn't as prosperous as we are.
Yeah, no property rights, no borders, no use of carbon. I guess the radical left wants to generate for us an imaginary world where we can fly around on our transgendered unicorns on our way to a Bernie Sanders drum circle. But that's not the world that
fun.
That's not the world I want to live in. I'm ready for, I think, ownership societies where people can not only own their own property, but own their own health care plan, own their own decisions about education and the like.
Well, and that's what drove most of the immigration to this country. It was the idea that, what do you mean I can go and I can have my own house and the government can't come and just take it away from me because the ruler of this district of my state decides he wants my house?
Well, right. And you don't have to be a math whiz to calculate that you can't have open borders and a welfare state. Mm-hmm. You can't have open borders and socialism, because eventually you run out of other people's money.
Yeah, I've heard that before. Matt, I've got to ask you, we only have a few minutes before the bottom of the hour, but you are young, up and coming, but you have grasped the idea of the get along to go along idea. Doesn't lead anyone anywhere, but it seems to be what's crippled Washington. We have elections coming up in November. Our entire General Assembly's up for grabs. All the Democrats' message is, he's just like Trump. Don't vote for him. Talk to young Republicans, young conservatives about running a brash, honest campaign and not worrying about what happens tomorrow or who likes you tomorrow.
Well, young conservatives need no lesson from me, because young conservatives have been, I think, castigated by their professors. They have been labeled by the radical left. It's frankly a lot of the baby boomers who get elected to Congress. They come up here, they enjoy life in Washington, D.C., rolling from one embassy party to the next, and they become, in some cases, part of the corrupt Washington that is bipartisan in nature. The political elite in this town is not just member of one party or member of another party. There is a permanent political elite that resists change. That's their ideology. Their ideology is to maintain the status quo. And so what I would say to voters or young patriots out there is that we need fighters, not just in Congress, but in state legislatures, city councils, on school boards.
Amen.
If we really want to get the full benefit and opportunity out of the Donald Trump presidency, we need a call to political action for people to step forward and say, I am ready to make changes that other people don't, that are too captive to special interests are too cowardly to make.
Well, and being honest about it, and I've said this on the program many times, there are only 4 people on the planet that I really care if they like me or not. My wife and my 3 kids.
There you
All
go.
of my listeners, each one of them is sauce for the goose.
I want my pastor to like me. I would add my pastor to this.
Okay. Well,
if your pastor doesn't like you, like if you're a parishioner, not even a pastor, that may say something about you.
Well, yeah, Alice Cooper's song about what was his name, Parson Smithy punching me in the nose. But the point is that we can't worry about what other people think about us. Because it's the road to good, the road to damnation put with good intention. You want your neighbors to like you, but they don't like you just because you tell them what they want to hear.
Well, but in Washington, it's in many cases monetary. Like if you're kind of viewed as a good time Charlie, as like a go along get along gal, then there's a certain lifestyle you get to lead here with fundraisers and dinner parties, and that's kind of the way of the world. And to some people, that is the thing that they are going for. I mean, that's why they ran. And I think that my ethic and the ethic of people like Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, Devin Nunes, Tom McClintock, people that step forward and say, look, this place has got to change. If we're going to save this country, we cannot just be in Congress rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. We've got to actually drive structural reform, and that takes rolling up your sleeves, sometimes throwing a few elbows.
Well, Matt, it's great meeting you, and thank you for coming by and visiting with us. Do you hold out hope that this will make it through, can maybe win over some Democrats?
Hey, look, Donald Trump gives us the greatest opportunity in my lifetime to have change because 1, he's not bought by anybody, and 2, he isn't afraid of anybody. So give me somebody with those 2 features, and we can do what we need to do to save this country.
Thank you, sir. I really
Thanks,
appreciate
Joe.
it.
Enjoyed it.
Matt Gaetz, Congressman from Florida. Until next week, thanks for all of us here at tertiumquids.org. Look up the podcast on our YouTube channel as well. I'm Joe Thomas at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. So long, and thanks for all the fish.